Okay, good morning all. I can now confirm that it is 10 a.m. and we are ready to start the meeting.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Licensing Subcommittee of 10 a.m. on June the 3rd, 2020. I would like to advise that this is the first ever live virtual meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, and today we'll be using Zoom technology to provide a live stream to members of the public. Please, we ask everyone to bear with us as we are dealing with numerous internet connections, and sometimes that can cause a slight delay. And as I'm sure everyone will appreciate, this is new technology for all of us. So if there are any hiccups, please bear with us, and we will work to resolve them as quickly as possible. Right, to move the meeting forward, I will pass you over to Sammy Wintle.
Thank you, Chairman. During the meeting, all participants, except for the Chairman, will be muted, and this should remain during the whole of the meeting unless you have asked to speak. May I take this opportunity to remind you that should you wish to speak during the meeting, please could you use the raise the hand button, which can be found at the bottom of the participant screen. The Chairman will then be notified of your request, and when speaking, if we could ask you to unmute yourself to speak and then mute yourself once you have spoken. When asking a question, please could we ask members to refer to page numbers if possible within the report or agenda for ease to officers. If we have to adjourn the meeting, the Chairman will advise of this and the anticipated length of adjournment. Those that have made the licensing officer aware that they would like to speak at today's meeting will be called forward to speak at the appropriate time. Please can we ask you to speak loudly and clearly. Once members have completed the process of hearing all representations, they will then move into a confidential debating session. The decision will then be heard in public via a further Zoom meeting, and this decision meeting will be available for viewing from 12:30 today. Chairman, if I can now complete a roll call of those members present. If I could ask members just to say present. Councillor Wells.
Present.
Councillor Wainwright.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Bensley.
Present.
Thank you. Chairman, I can confirm that officers present in the meeting today. We have Elaine Hignett, Licensing Officer, who will be presenting the application to the committee. Denise Wilby, Elections and a Licence Manager. And David Lowens, Solicitor for MP Law. And Sammy Wintle, Corporate Services Manager. Chairman, I can confirm that today we have Jonathan Smith from Poppleston Allen, the solicitor acting on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Gary Villiers of Haven Leisure speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Vaughan Rice speaking against the application, and Mr. Patrick Walsh speaking against the application. Thank you, Chairman. We can now start the agenda items.
Right. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Chairman, I can confirm we have received no apologies for absence today.
Thank you, Sammy. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations they want to declare? I think that's no. So,
yeah, Chairman, I can confirm no hands have been raised.
So item 3, application to vary premises licence. The committee are asked to consider an application to vary a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003, Caister Holiday Park, which is Show Bar, Mash and Barrel and Papa John's, Ormsby Road, Caister, Great Yarmouth. And if I can now pass over to Elaine to present the report.
Okay. This is an application by Haven Leisure Limited and Live Lounge Show Bar, situated at Ormsby Road, Caister, Great Yarmouth. The applicant has applied for the following changes: the addition of outside regulated entertainment, being plays, films, live and recorded music, performance of dance, and anything similar from 11 AM to 11 PM Monday to Saturday, and noon to 10:30 PM on Sundays. Also, the addition of an outside area to incorporate a stage and screen for the outdoor events. The licensable hours and activities for indoors to remain as existing. A copy of the application can be found on pages 3 to 17 of the agenda. The current premises licence authorises the following: plays, films, sporting events, boxing or wrestling, live music, recorded music, and performance of dance, all indoors, and the supply of alcohol on and off the premises. Timings for these activities are currently 8 AM to 2 AM Monday to Sunday. The current licence also authorises late night refreshment, 11 PM to 2 AM Monday to Sunday, and there is also a non-standard timing of an extra hour on each licensable activity on the day that British summertime commences, and a 24-hour opening on New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. A copy of the current premises licence is shown on pages 19 to 34 of the agenda. Upon expiry of the 28-day representation period, 2 representations were received objecting to the application. Both representations are from local residents. One representation is in the form of a petition containing 22 valid names and addresses. The second representation is from 2 local residents. The 2 residents also signed the petition. A copy of the first page of the petition is on page 35 of the agenda. A copy of the second representation is on page 36. I will now just update you on some changes made since the application was first submitted. The first change is that the applicant has agreed to reduce the hours of all licensable activities in the proposed outside area to a 10 PM close each day. This was as a result of correspondence from Environmental Health. Environmental Health did not submit a formal representation in relation to the application. The second change is that it has been confirmed that the non-standard timings stated in the application, which are those relating to British summertime and New Year's Eve to New Year's Day, do not relate to the outside area. Mr. Rice, who submitted the petition, is attending today, and also Mr. Walsh, who supplied a valid entry on the petition, is also attending. Mr. and Mrs. Headley, who submitted the second objection, have advised that they will not be attending today. However, they have advised that they both maintain their statements as previously submitted and still maintain that the application should be rejected on the grounds already stated in previous communications. They believe that this is the generally held view of the majority of local residents in the highly residential area. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you for that, Elaine. I know several people do want to speak on this in terms of the applicants and also the objectors. I'd like to assure everyone they will get a chance for them to speak and to take the time to make the points they need to make to the committee. But at this stage, at the meeting, we need to move over to see whether any members have got any specific questions for the licensing officer. So, Trevor or James, do you have anything you want to ask?
No, not this stage, no.
Right.
No, me neither. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I've just managed to mute myself briefly. So we now move on, and I'd like to invite Mr. Smith to make a short opening statement.
Just bear with me, Chairman. I just need to give Mr. Villiers Mr. Smith, sorry. So Mr. Smith. You can now speak, Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, everybody else, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Super. Thank you very much. The application is, as Elaine has said, is to vary the premises licence to include an outside area within the premises licence for regulated entertainment. Just to stress, there's no request to allow the sale of alcohol out there, nor for late night refreshment out there. There are no changes requested to the internal operation or the licence as it pertains to indoors. The hours which we initially submitted, as Elaine mentioned, were from noon to 22:30 on a Sunday and 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday for permission for regulated entertainment in the outside area. But after discussions with the Environmental Health Officer, Alex Pender, those hours were changed to 10 p.m. as a terminal hour, so noon until 10 p.m. Sunday and 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Saturday. Councillors, if I could ask you to have a look at page 17 of your agenda. And I'm assuming, unless anybody shouts, that you're all with me on the pages, that you can see outlined in blue in the centre of the plan, the area where the outdoor entertainment is proposed. Now, this is where it gets slightly complicated, and I'm sure your solicitor will advise you in closed session, and it's within paragraph 16 of the national guidance. Much of the entertainment that we propose out there is not regulated by the Licensing Act 2003, since the Live Music Act 2012 was introduced. So the performance of plays, live music, and the performance of dance are regulated entertainment which are permitted as of right without necessarily having any permission on the premises licence. What is not permitted outdoors, however, is recorded music, any entertainment of a like kind, and it's difficult to envisage what that could be, but to give you some ideas, you might have a noddy show on the stage, or you might have Punch and Judy, or you could have perhaps the Fun Stars on the stage who are doing an act or a dance. They are an entertainment of a like kind, but also what is not included under the deregulation is the showing of films. And by that I mean pre-recorded films. You can show live television without any permission on your licensing act, under the licensing act, but you cannot show pre-recorded films. So that is not regulated. So it's of a fairly limited nature that we're asking for those permissions until 10 o'clock in the area outlined in blue, which of course are not covered by the Live Music Act and are therefore not deregulated. The proposal is to show the films on a screen which is on a stage and is contained within that outdoor entertainment area, and that is where any recorded music or any performances of dance, anything goes on, would all go around the stage and the screen area. And planning permission has been granted for that stage area, and that is on pages 37 through to 40 of your agenda. The planning was granted back in February, and I would ask you to have a look specifically on page 38 at conditions 4, 5 and 6. And condition 4 is that we cannot, we must carry out this development in accordance with the stage and the screen, in accordance with the recommendations which are provided in the noise report, which I'll come on to in a minute. That at number 5, before we can use the screen, that we must fit a limiter, has to be installed, and the level of that limiter agreed with the local planning authority. And it's got to remain set at such a level. And then number 6 limits the hours to 10 o'clock, which is in accordance now with the amended application. So most importantly, councillors, at condition 5, there must be a noise limiter installed and set at levels agreed with the local planning authority. And those that limiter is set with reference to a point of measurement which is 10 metres from the speakers by the stage. So the speakers are going to be underneath the stage, as I understand it. The area in front of it is all has been relayed. It's an astroturf material, so it's quite absorbent. There are some small mounds in front of the screen and television screen and stage, so that people can sit on these, but it also helps to absorb any noise. And there's actually also the shop is between the stage and the screen, and also Dodd Close. So the shop is between the two. We also, councillors, and I would ask you to bear this in mind, and I will repeat it later, we do have rows of at least 4 caravans between the stage and the screen, and Dodd's Close or John's Road to the south. So we have our own holidaymakers to consider in their own caravans. If I could ask you to turn to the noise report then, which is on page 41 of the agenda and onwards. This noise report was seen by the planners clearly, because it is referenced in the grant of the planning application at condition 4. So it requires us to carry out this development to the stage and the screen in accordance with this report. The sound test you can see on page, it's difficult to see, I think it's page 47 of the agenda, but the easier bit to see is it's page 7 of 14 in the bottom right hand corner. The actual agenda number items get lost within the wording noise management plan. But on page 7 of the report, you can see that the test was carried out on the 4th of January 2020. And importantly, that was when the park was closed. So background noise would have been lower. And it was carried out, you can see towards the bottom of page 7 of the report, between 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. And if I ask you just to have a look at page 6, the page before at paragraph 3.3, discussions were held between the acoustic engineer who carried the report out and Alex Pender, who's the environmental health officer, who asked us to pull the hours back to 2200. And the discussions were that the noise levels from the screen, the amplification from the screen and stage, could not exceed 5 dBA during the daytime up to 1900 at the nearest residential premises. Nearest residence. You can see it paragraph 3.3. And after 1900 and before 2200, it could not exceed the background level at all. So in other words, after 7 p.m, you can't hear the screen at all. You can't hear anything going on from that stage. Now, what happens with the limiter? There will be a noise limiter fitted, which will be tamper-proof. That will be fitted, and it will be fitted to the speakers, and any amplification of any entertainment, whether it be from the screen, whether it be from the fun stars, whether it be from a comedian on stage or any sort of compare on the stage, it will all go through this limiter. So therefore, the noise readings at 3.3 will pertain to any form of amplified noise, whether or not it's regulated entertainment or not. So anybody using the stage, any member of staff, the fun stars, whatever's going on in the stage or that area, it will go through the limiter. And on page 9, this is where it gets a bit technical. It just talks about what level the noise limiter will have to be fitted. It's at paragraph 5.1. You can see that the acoustician recommends that it's set at 77 dB, 10 meters from the main loudspeakers during the daytime, and then of course 5 dB lower in the evening to make sure that it cannot be heard at all after 7 p.m. And then on page 11 of the report, it talks about the tamper-proof audio level limiter that will be fitted, and that will be fitted with the local planning authority and Alex Pender. So all entertainment, and I stress all entertainment, whether we have to do it or not, which involves any amplification of sound or noise, will then go through the speakers and the limiter. Finally, on page 11 at paragraph 6.3, there were 4 other recommendations which were made by the acoustic report: that there should be a contact telephone number available, there should be a diary of noise complaints, that site management should investigate complaints, and then records should be kept. And all of those we are happy to put to you by way of conditions. And if I ask you to turn to page 55 of your agenda, everyone, councillors, you can see the 6 conditions that we have offered as part of this application. So numbers 1 and 2 actually mirror what's on the planning. And number 3 is the point of contact that we will provide. Number 4 is the diary. Number 5 is investigation. And then number 6 is to keep the records. And that just makes sure that the grant of the licence is consistent with the planning and the acoustic report. And of course, most importantly for you is that the acoustic report requires us to, as I said, install the noise limiter and fix it at those levels of 77 and 72 to ensure compliance with those agreed noise readings at the nearest residential premises. A brief history: Caistor Holiday Park's been there since 1906 and has often had outdoor entertainment. At the moment, we tend to only have it a couple of weekends a year during the summer. There's a Sunday charity that they will have some outdoor entertainment for. And we want to enhance that outdoor experience, the outdoor entertainment that's going on, which is why the area has been refurbished with the introduction of the screen and the stage. Robert Mills, who's currently furloughed, is the complex manager and designated premises supervisor, has been there since 2011, and Gary, who's on the call since January 2019. Having spoken to Robert, I am aware that he had one complaint in 2018 about noise from a charity event. And having spoken to Gary, I'm aware that he did receive a letter last year from Alex Pender, the Environmental Health Officer, which is referred to in the email correspondence following a complaint from a resident about, we believe, indoor noise. We were never able to establish where that complaint came from, councillors. The complainant was to send diary sheets through to Alex Pender so that he could send them on to Gary, but I believe that didn't happen, so we were unable to establish where the noise had come from. As far as we're aware, Mr. Rice has not complained to either Gary nor to Robert, and we did write to Mr. Rice. As you can see, Gary Villiers posted a letter through Mr. Rice's letterbox on the 9th of March. It's at page 57, asking if we could speak to Mr. Rice and just talk to him about it. We can't disturb our own holiday makers, councillors, and we are required by the noise report after 7 o'clock that any amplified sound cannot be heard, and we're prepared to put all of our amplification through the limiter to make sure that's the case. Mr. Rice has a petition before you. I don't know what Mr. Rice told people when he was on their doorstep. He wouldn't have known at the time, to be fair, that we were pulling the application back to 10 o'clock. I don't know whether he knew that we were required to install a noise limiter, nor that whether or not the entertainment would have to go through the limiter. He may well not have done, councillors. We obviously can't ask the people who have signed the petition whether, in light of that, they would be happy. We are only aware of 2 complaints in the last 2 years, as I've said, and more importantly, or very importantly, there is no representation from the Environmental Health Officer. Had there been lots of unsubstantiated complaints or 1 or 2 substantiated complaints, then by the guidance in paragraph 9.15, you would expect the Environmental Health Officer to object. Mr. Headley references us playing music 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We clearly aren't doing that, and I don't know why he is under that apprehension. And we're not aware he's ever complained about any music. He certainly, as far as we know, has not complained to either Robert or Gary about any issues with the noise. I assume I will have a chance, Chairman, to come back right at the end with a summing up, but any questions?
All right.
Mr. Smith, I can confirm you do have the ability to have a closing statement at the end, but we will let you know when this will be.
Sammy, can you, Sammy?
Trevor, can we go through the chair for questions, please?
Oh, sorry. I couldn't see you. I'm going to just see the picture. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So thank you, Jonathan, Mr. Smith, for that. Obviously, Trevor's got a question, and I imagine a couple of other people. Whereas, can I just quickly check, Sammy? Are objectors allowed to ask questions at this stage as well? So,
yes, I can confirm they are, Chairman.
Yeah. So if you wish to, if you're an objector and you wish to ask a question, if you can raise your hand and Sally will make a note of it. And then we'll move, but we'll start off with Councillor Wainwright.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. I mean, that was a very comprehensive report, and obviously there's a lot of mitigation been put in there. It's really just it's a question I'm sure you can answer. I mean, obviously, when you put this application in, back in January, I would imagine, obviously, the coronavirus was on nobody's radar at the time at all. So my question is, I mean, I would imagine that this is even more important now to not only your organisations, but any others who will probably come forward with similar ones in the future, because of the coronavirus and holding outdoor events. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I unmuted still?
No, we can hear you, Mr. Smith. That's fine
You
if you
can.
can answer the question. Thank you.
Yes, obviously, when we lodged the application, we didn't know about the terrible situation we find ourselves in now. Holiday parks are, and we act probably about 200 around the country, are in a fairly envious position, to be fair, that they do have large outside areas, and they can't be used at the moment because you can't use any area adjacent to a bar or a pub or anywhere selling alcohol for consumption on the premises. You just can't do that. But yes, Councillor, you are correct that with social distancing, and it would appear the virus not spreading nearly so easily outdoors as it does indoors, that such areas will be very important. And I think it's also fair to say that staycations are also going to be more popular than ever, I suspect. So there will be a demand, I'm sure, for this area to be used.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Bensley, you did have your hand raised, but you've since lowered it. Did you want a question?
Yeah, if I can, please, Chair. If I can, please, Sammy. Yeah, Mr. Smith, thank you for the report. I just want to touch on the 4 rows of caravans that you said are blocking this stage to the residents. Will those 4 rows of caravans, are they on a weekly cycle of new tourists every week, or are they pre-owned caravans? And if they are pre-owned, are the owners aware of this application?
Councillors, if I just ask you to have a quick look at page 7 of 14.
Yep.
That gives you quite a good idea. You can see the screen, and then you can see where the caravans are, both to the south, which I think is John's Road, and then to the north, which is Holt Road at the end of, if you go due north, that's Holt Road. And if you go northwest, that then takes you to Dodd Close.
Yeah.
To ask Gary, however, to advise whether the caravans there are owners or whether they are rentals. Gary, are you able to help us there? I imagine there might be a mixture, but I'm obviously, I have no idea, so I'm over to you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, as you suggest, they're of mixed use, so some will be owned, and those owners will pay site fees to us to keep their caravan here, and some will be what we call our fleet, which is where we have a cycle of holiday makers coming in and enjoying their time at Caister-on-Sea.
Lovely. And I've got Gary, if I can just ask a follow-up question, please. Are any of the owners as such, are any of them aware of this application, and have you had any feedback from them?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we've made all of our owners fully aware of the development. It's part of a larger development, which is bringing some major activities in, such as high ropes and outdoor type activities. We need to do more things outdoors for holiday makers. This is just one aspect of it. And our owners, our 600 or so owners, are on the whole very excited about it.
Yep, no worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just one quick question from myself. In terms of these events, are you planning for these events to be purely for internal residents use, or are you planning to consider opening them out to wider audiences in terms of, people coming on site to actually listen to the entertainment, or is it just going to be for residents?
Sorry, Chairman. I'll ask Gary to confirm, but I'm pretty certain they will be confined to simply the residents and holiday makers on site. The things that's particularly like to do is, if you wanted to show, it's slightly bizarre, if you wanted to show Nemo or Toy Story on a Saturday afternoon at 5 till 7 o'clock, and for the children to come and watch it and sit in that area on bean bags and on the mound, we actually do need permission from yourselves to do that, because the showing of films is not regulated. But Gary, I'm pretty certain in saying this isn't going to be opened up for a general cinema night for everyone else, is it?
No, there's certainly no plans to do that. The facilities on the site are really here for our holiday makers and our owners. Although, you know, we don't have barbed wire and big fences to stop people coming in and out, and whilst we're in lockdown, you'll find plenty of local people walking their dogs through, and you know, we don't have any problem with that. But the use of our core facilities remain for essentially for the people who are paying for them.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Sammy, do any of the objectors want to ask a question?
Yep, so I can confirm Mr. Rice has his hand raised.
Right. Okay, Mr. Rice, do you want to ask a question of Mr. Smith at this point? I would stress that you will get a chance for you to present your full piece as well.
Well, we've moved on for half an hour, which has made it quite difficult now because there's so many points been brought up. Back to the Haven spokesman. I did manage to catch some of these. We don't do shorthand, but I picked up on some of the points made there. We strongly dispute noise levels have been acceptable in the past. I won't go through them all, but there's been dozens.
Just to stress that this is the point to ask questions rather to present your counter arguments.
Right, okay. Right, question. The current speakers outside the mash and barrel, will these also go through the limiters, the ones that they've got there now?
I'll have to ask Gary that. They obviously are not in that area. So this is an existing permission that they're able to do in the mash and barrel. But Gary, are you able to confirm whether they will have a limiter fitted on them as well?
There's no plans to change anything other than the application. So far as I'm aware, any external speakers on the mash and barrel, there would only be the ones that are on the external sort of decking area, and they're really just used for people when they're sitting, eating and drinking just on the decking area. We don't really have we don't have entertainment out there as such.
Councillors, if I could just, of course, the application today is not reviewing the existing operation at the mash and barrel, but actually asking for the outdoor area by the screen.
Chairman, if I can just ask for confirmation from our solicitor, it is just the application that is in front of members to be considered today. So I just want, if we could get clarification from the solicitor just to confirm that it is only that in front of us today that we would be discussing. David?
David, are you here?
There we go. I should be coming through now. Am I coming through?
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you.
Right and clear.
Yes. Just confirm we're dealing only with the variation application.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rice, do you have any more questions you wish to?
Oh yeah, that moves me back to the point really of the existing licence. This is outside entertainment. There's no licence. This came up on this application. Haven have been operating for however many years outside of their licensing application. It's outdoor noise with these outdoors.
Sorry, Chairman, can we? The solicitor would like to speak, please.
Yes, sorry, David.
It was just a flag. We're at the point of questions rather than concerns on general matters.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, we'll need to very carefully consider just the variation application.
Yes, I'm sure members will. But it says so. Mr. Rice, do you have any more questions?
Yes. Well, I think it is relevant because obviously statements have been made by the Haven spokesman.
Mr. Rice, I can assure you, you'll have your chance to present your full argument. Said that this.
I'm not trying to present an argument. What I'm trying to present is the facts of the situation. The Haven spokesman had quite a long time there.
But that is where, you know, unfortunately, you need to couch this in terms of questions at this point, please, sir.
Why did the Haven spokesman mislead the councillors by giving incorrect information?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, if you would like, Mr. Smith.
Certainly. Any entertainment that will have been carried on outdoors, of course, under the Live Music Act, there is live music you can have outdoors, you can have plays outdoors, you can have performance of dance outdoors, you can have background music outdoors, you can have simultaneous television shown outdoors. So all of that can be done under the Live Music Act, councillors, as I'm sure you know, between 8 in the morning and 11 at night. The actual benefit in now having such entertainment provided by the stage and screen is it will go through the speakers and the limiter.
Right, okay. David, can you just confirm that that's it from your point of view as the council solicitor, that that's your interpretation of the legislation as well?
Yes, the power is quite wide. It stays there until something's reviewed.
Right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Rice, do you have any further questions? If not, I will move forward to invite Mr. Villiers to make his presentation.
Yes, outdoor entertainment might be licensed. I would ask Haven if they think it's reasonable to have music so loud, 4 metres from residential properties, that people inside the house can't hear their own TV. One of the residents is very fortunate. He's deaf. He takes his hearing aid out. But we're talking 4 metres behind residential boundaries. And we're talking a very loud volume. Do they think this is reasonable?
Shall I answer that?
Yes, please.
So well, I'm not sure where the 4 metres is, but this screen is some 150 metres from Dodd Close. I don't know where Mr. Rice is referring to, but the screen is, as you can see from page 7 of 14 of the noise report and also the licensing plan, it's some 150 metres away from Dodd Close and a similar distance to John Road where we don't have any complaints. So I don't know what music it is Mr. Rice is referring to. Just as a side point, before I finish that, Mr. Villiers won't be making any other statement. He's done it through me, councillors, to save time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So in that point, do members have any further questions? I directed to Mr. Villiers as well, I suppose. And
Chairman, I can confirm no hands are raised.
Right, can I ask one quick question myself then? Mr. Villiers, obviously Mr. Smith has drawn reference to the idea that this application is primarily in the context of low level, more kind of like films and small scale events. What, what kind of incidents are you thinking in terms between, kind of doing stuff at 6 and 7 p.m. for argument's sake, as opposed to going right to the end of the license?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So in terms of within your rough plans, are you planning to do the majority of your kind of activities in a particular set time? How many of them are you planning to do towards the end of the requested license period? So towards the end, basically late at night, for argument's sake, or at night.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we don't have a schedule of events planned for the stage at all. The situation as it stands at the moment. We've got some other outdoor stage and screens, a couple of other holiday parks, but it's a relatively new thing for us here at Haven. And with the everything being on hold due to the lockdown, I don't have a schedule as such of the type of entertainment that's going to be held. I know that the main reason for the change in the license is really just to enable us more than anything to be able to show movies, as we already have under the terms of the license. We can already carry out a great deal of outdoor activity as it is. But of course, the benefit being, as Jonathan suggested, that anything we do on the stage will be through the limiters.
And Chairman, if I could just clarify, of course, after 7 o'clock at night, anything going on the stage from the screen must be inaudible with the setting of the limiter. There won't be any noise at all at the points marked on the plan on page 7.
Right.
I think if I might just add, so if you're worried or concerned that we're going to move, for example, the kind of high energy evening entertainment that we hold in the live lounge outside, no, there are no plans to do anything like that whatsoever. Our main entertainment venues will remain our main entertainment venues. This is purely an ancillary area to enable people to be outside, gather together, and see some fairly light entertainment. We won't be moving our main entertainment complex outside.
Right, thank you for that. And I assume the points you made in relation to the fact you haven't got set plans at the moment also apply to whether you had any idea about the frequency of doing these events.
Yeah, I'm afraid so at the moment. I'm just waiting on the business to kind of start getting back to normal so we can actually make some proper plans for the usage of. Okay,
I understand that. Right, okay.
Yep. Chairman, I can confirm we have a question from the solicitor, Mr. Lowens.
Right, okay. Fire away, please.
Oh, cheers. Just for a quick clarification, as the applicant's lister mentioned inaudible, and I think we need to be very careful on using that phrase. Looking at page 6 of 14, we've got para 3.3, and I'm not sure inaudible is fair. The idea is to be no higher than background after 7 p.m.
Sorry, yes, I agree. Sorry, David, can I call you David? Apologies. Inaudible is because inaudible to one person may not be inaudible to another. You're correct in that it should not exceed the background level of noise. Apologies, that's quite correct.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so at this point, we move to the further representation. So this is your point, Mr. Rice, to present your presentation.
Mr. Rice, you should be able to speak now.
I'm sorry, we've not even got halfway to anywhere near the bottom of this. You're asking me to represent something when I've been blocked from asking numerous questions. But anyway, we'll try and move forward. I don't find this very democratic. We've had lots of noise in the past. The planning application.
Just to stop you there, sir. Rice. Sorry, you made quite a bold statement there. Just to be clear, we are very keen to try and make sure everyone has their say. So if you have got a further question you wish to ask Mr. Villiers and Mr. Smith, which is relevant to the current application, please feel free before if you wish to end before you move on to your presentation or representation.
Let's move back to Mr. Smith then. Mr. Smith, we have these noise reports. I noticed that there is more noise down on the beach. That's a further point away from your development than there is at these houses. I can't quite figure that one out. But anyway, I think the thing is that we have got a noise level of 40 decibels. Now, if this is tied into the license, I don't think anybody would object because 40 decibels is a quiet library. So do you intend to keep the noise down to the level of a quiet library? We're willing to install decimeters to measure this. And I think, that might potentially be a way around this, but you would have to stick by the library level noise criteria that you've added to the application.
Mr. Smith?
To answer you, Mr. Rice, we are obliged by the grant of the planning to install a limiter and to carry out the development in accordance with the noise report that was done, which stipulates 77 dB from the speakers measured 10 meters away from them in the daytime and 72, and that then corresponds to 5 dBA above background when measured at those two crosses in the noise report. And then it will not be the noise, the music, the amplified music or noise cannot be above the background noise level after 7 o'clock. So we have to stick by that, and the noise limiter will be fitted and it will be tamper-proof. It cannot be tampered with. I imagine probably Gary might be the only person, or the complex manager, the designated premises supervisor, who will be the only people who will know how that can be changed. So any entertainment will go through that limiter, Mr. Rice.
It's really irrelevant what's coming out the speaker. I don't care what comes out the speaker. I don't think anybody else does. What we care about is the level of noise that reaches us. You're measuring in the wrong area. It's an irrelevant place to measure. You know, why don't you measure at the boundaries where the noise level is most important?
Could I answer that? The noise measurements were taken on the 4th of January at points 1 and points 2. If you have a look, Mr. Rice, on page 7 of 14 of the report, that's where the acoustic expert took the readings of the net level of background noise at those 2 points. And I'm not an acoustic expert by any means, but then has said, well, if that is the level of noise we can hear there on the 4th of January, and please bear in mind the park wasn't open then, we didn't do it at the height of summer, then in order to make sure that those noise levels at paragraph 3.3 are met, which Alex Pender has suggested we should do as the environmental health officer, then the noise coming from the speakers when measured 10 meters away needs to be 77 and 72. So in effect, Mr. Rice, I take your point, you need to know what it's going to be at points 1 and point 2, but it will be at point 1 and point 2 by measuring and making sure the limiter is fitted so that 10 meters away, it doesn't exceed 77 and 72.
We're back to the same point, though. That's irrelevant, isn't it, to us? What's relevant is the noise level at the boundaries. That's what we're really interested in. As I say, you know, we're not killjoys, do what you want, but we just fear there's so many breaches in the past. The fate day, I recall that, the complaint there was you had all the speakers facing residential houses. We asked if you'd turn them round. That was all, face them into the camp, not out. So it wasn't a complaint against the fate, it was a complaint against the speakers being selfishly pointed straight at residential houses. And, you know, we just fear that you're going to measure there, and if that complies with this licensing application, then you're okay. But that could be well louder where we are. This is just an estimation. What we want is these noise levels at our boundary, because 40 decibels, same noise level as inside the library, that's fine by me. I've got no objections to that. I, though, can't quite honestly see how the hell you're going to do this. Can you?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I can just jump in there. The solicitor had his hand raised. He has since lowered it. I'm not sure whether Mr. Lowens wanted to speak.
David?
I wasn't clear where we were going. We've moved on, and I think we're now back on the variation application, which is helpful.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry, you can continue, Mr. Rice.
Well, of course, you've moved on, but I didn't get to put the questions earlier. That's why we've moved back. As I say, the application is flawed in the fact that you're measuring noise at an irrelevant point to the residents who have objected. The relevance is at our properties. And what we would like is this 40 decibels, I think, at the very least, written in at the boundary. Because if that can be achieved, I can't see how. A sparrow makes more noise than 40 decibels. I can't see how they're going to do this, but if they can, I think most residents will be happy with that. So will you measure at the boundaries where it counts? Will you please keep your doors closed when you've got indoor entertainment? Because again, that's where the noise comes from. The mash and barrel outdoor speakers, you didn't even license for those. 5 years we've had noise from outside speakers, again pointing towards residential properties instead of pointing into the mash and barrel. But as I say, then we'll find out today or yesterday that you didn't even have a license to play that music. So, you know, we've had 5 years we know of breaches of licensing. How can we?
I believe the solicitor, David Lowndes, would like to speak again just very quickly for some clarification on the comments. So, David.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but you're not here to listen to complaints regarding 5 years of the mash and barrel. Sorry to be blunt, but your obligation is to consider this variation.
Thank you, and I'm sure councillors do appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Oh, sorry, my brain's gone blank for a second. Mr. Rice, I do apologise. Would I believe actually Mr. Smith has got his hand up, I think, to answer the comments you've made.
Well, just to summarise this, if I may, before we go.
Yeah, okay, and then yes.
That was background information to noise that was received, but again, maybe that over there it was what they thought was okay. The relevance of the whole situation is the licensing requires this to be measured near the speakers. What I'm suggesting is that it could well be acceptable if you measure at the boundaries. It is the boundary that counts, not near the speakers. I mean, I know I'm on the spot, but I'm presuming bass wouldn't travel at 40 decibels. But what I'm saying is, will you make an amendment to measure at your boundaries?
Well, all in terms of the councillors at the end of this, we'll go into a discussion where we will be reviewing the application, deciding what conditions we wish to put on that side of things. So I think that's all I can say at that point, from that point of view. But Mr. Smith, have you got a response as well?
Yes, thank you, councillors. I am conscious that this is being live streamed, and Mr. Rice has made some quite sweeping statements that it's come to light that the Mash and Barrel has been playing music entertainment without a license. And I know we are only talking about the outside area, but I've got to put this on record for what is a large company with many, many caravan parks around the country, that we are quite entitled by the Live Music Act to play background music, to play live music, a duo or a soloist, by the Live Music Act on the terrace of the Mash and Barrel. We're quite entitled to do that. And I do find it wrong that Mr. Rice is suggesting that in such a public forum, and I'd like to put that on record, councillors.
And I'm sure that will be properly noted.
Yeah, I can confirm that, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, Mr. Rice, have you got anything more you wish to say, or are you happy for us to move to members asking you questions at this point? Oh, I don't know if you're muted or not. I think you're muted at the moment, Mr. Rice.
I mean, if they were allowed to have this music, maybe that's right. I don't know. I'm not a solicitor there, but I did notice in the license.
Rice, would it be possible for you to start again? Just because, unfortunately, I think you were muted for part of that, and so I wasn't able to hear the beginning bit of what you were saying, sir.
Yes, no problem. I was just saying that maybe they're right with background music. It's different from music. Background music, I do believe, is supposed to be hold a conversation 2 meters apart. It's louder than background music, but whether that's can be played or not, I don't know. Mr. Smith might be better placed for that. But where I pick the concern up, that in the licensing application, they've now asked for this music to be outside, whereas before they didn't. I can't understand why you would ask that to be included in your license if you don't need to. But anyway, that's where I picked the point up from. It was not applied for in the past, and now it's being applied for.
Right. Okay. Do members have any questions for Mr. Rice?
Chairman, I can confirm I've got no member hands raised.
Okay. Thank you. So continuing on.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I just wanted to check that Mr. Smith or Mr. Villiers had no questions.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
Chairman, I can confirm I've got no hands raised.
Right. Okay. And so continuing on, I believe, Mr. Walsh, you now have your opportunity to express your views. So, Sammy will unmute you shortly, and please begin at your leisure.
Mr. Walsh, I can confirm you are now unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Walsh, we
Yes,
can.
you can hear me okay, yeah? I'm going to speak very loud because I've got a bit of a problem with my computer volume. I said, we are Mrs. Patrick and Christine Walsh. We lived in Clayshire for 30 years, right? We live in the Close, which is George Close. The closest houses to the Ken, consisting of 7 houses, 2 with 3 young children each, 3 with elderly pensioners, late 70s to 80s, and with 1 60-year-old couple. Early to bed children, early to bed pensioners, having been used to a quiet and undisturbed existence up till now, notwithstanding late night noise on occasions from the camp. Who would deem to suggest at this hearing that our quality of life will not be impaired if this application is approved? I can assure you it will, it definitely will. And from now onwards, from 11 AM in the morning to 11 PM at night, every day and every night, during the entire holiday season, every year, and this on top of what we already put up with and complain regularly about year after year. Our quality of life will be impaired in various ways, i.e. noise at the time of year, but it can be necessary to leave bedroom windows open to accommodate fresh air and coolness, both for the children and for the adults, which further compromises this application. Garden leisure activities and barbecues outdoors, family get-togethers, where background music or silence is required, again compromised. Listening to music indoors or TV programs with patio doors open, again compromised. Being forced to listen to something you don't necessarily enjoy, whether that be football, types of music, boxing events, etc. And of course, it will substantially compromise the value of our properties.
Mr. Walsh, sorry to interrupt. Could I just ask you to speak a little bit louder, please?
Speak a little bit louder. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And of course, will substantially compromise the value of all our properties, the very properties which are our children's inheritances. I would go so far as to say that our human rights are being violated only to accommodate Haven's expectations of further financial gain. Haven's confidence amazes us all in that all the practical background work has been done to accommodate this application and it has been carried out. But lastly, but on a positive note, on a possible compromise, I would suggest that Haven, in this instance, adopt the tried and tested alternative of accommodating various events on various screens simultaneously in the same area by using subtitles. Most of the big licensed premises do successfully. Thank you. That was the end of my objections. Thanks for letting me speak. And I congratulate Mr. Rice for accommodating us all in the area, for taking up the cudgel and making this protest. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Walsh. Apologies, there was a bit of distortion there. Can everyone hear me now? I think so. So thank you for that, Mr. Walsh. I see that Mr. Smith has his hand up to ask a question, but before we do that, have any members got any questions they wish to raise?
Chairman, I can confirm no hands are raised. Mr. Smith has since put his hand down. I'm not sure whether it would have been a volume thing, but I will just check with Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, do you have a question?
Yes, councillors, it was a volume thing, but when I put my ear right next to my laptop, I could then hear it. I was struggling at first, but it was simply a volume thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, I can confirm I've got no questions.
Right, thank you. Apologies, I've managed to put myself on mute again. Okay, so at this point, we will be inviting the various speakers to make closing statements, beginning with Mr. Rice, then Mr. Walsh, and then Mr. Villiers / Mr. Smith. So if you'd like to begin, Mr. Rice, with a closing statement.
Yeah, Chairman, I just wanted to confirm that there will be no further questions at this point. It's just closing statements.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rice, Sammy will shortly unmute you.
There we are, we'll be there. Yes, I think it's a closing statement. We would ask the councillors to consider an amendment to this licensing application and measure noise levels at residential property boundaries rather than in the camp. And if they can keep them down to 40 decibels, tie that into the license agreement. 40 decibels, as I say again, is the same noise level as inside a library. So will the councillors please consider having Haven monitor at the boundaries and keeping it down to the disclosed levels that they've said? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Walsh?
Have you got a question? No, no questions from me, no. I've made my statement and that's it, yeah.
Mr. Walsh, is there anything you wish further to say?
No, not really, no. I've made my statement. I'm quite satisfied with what I've said already.
Okay, thank you very much.
Taken on board, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Villiers, but I assume Mr. Villiers isn't speaking, Mr. Smith will be.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. I will be brief. You'll be glad to hear, councillors. I took up half an hour of your time earlier. The application is before you. It is to stress, and I'm sure your solicitor will stress this, about the noise levels and the entertainment outside. We're not here in any way talking about any noise or entertainment levels within the Mash and Barrel or the Live Lounge show bar. This is only to do with the noise levels and the regulated entertainment from the area shown in blue on the plan that you've got. And just to stress, the limiter we're talking about and the levels of music, amplified sound that will come from the screen and from the stage, from the speakers, are those within that outside area. And so the planning that has been granted, and I stress again, I'd ask you to look very carefully at the planning conditions, which we've then mirrored and taken on to the premises license by the conditions that are offered on page 55. And that will require us, therefore, to ensure that we abide by the noise survey that was done. And the professionals did this. Alex Pender's seen it. So my understanding is where you always do an acoustic report, you measure the noise, the background noise, at a point which is to the nearest residential properties. That was done on the 4th of January. Those background levels were found. And you work back from that. You then go to the speakers and say, right, well, you can't play the speakers louder than 77 and 72 dBAs when I'm stood 10 meters away. And that, councillors, if you fix the limiter at that, will mean that it's 5 dB above background before 7 o'clock. And to address your question, Chairman, about the later entertainment after 7 o'clock, it cannot be above at the background noise levels at all. And Mr. Walsh did refer to the Human Rights Act. Yes, of course, the Human Rights Act is there, but it's a balance. It's not an absolute right. So if you are able to provide a business with a permission, as long as you can do so and in compliance with the licensing objectives, so that you're satisfied on the balance there will be public nuisance, you can grant that. And that is why we're happy, and Mr. Walsh referred to people going to bed later on at night, the elderly later on at night sleeping. Well, after 7 o'clock, the limiter will be set so that the noise from the amplification on the stage and screen is below or does not exceed, I should say, the background levels. And Alex Pender, this is a very important point. Your policy refers to public nuisance at paragraph 7.1 to 7.3, but the guidance is very helpful for you here at paragraph 9.15, because you can expect as a licensing authority that a responsible authority will make a representation if they have concerns. And it's specifically paragraph 9.15 of the guidance talks about an environmental health officer making a representation where there are concerns about noise nuisance. And Alex Pender has been involved in the planning. He's been involved with this acoustic report. We've spoken to him about the timings. He's been involved all along and will, of course, be involved, I'm sure, in the fixing of that noise limiter. And I do stress again, councillors, that we will be putting through any amplified noise, speech, music from the stage, excuse me, and the screen area through that limiter. Whereas at the moment, if you're in that area and you're having some entertainment, it wouldn't go through a limiter. And also we do again have owners and caravan holiday makers within that immediate area, much closer than the residents. And we don't want to upset them either, as well as the local residents, to mean that they won't come back or will sell their caravan. And Mr. Rice and Mr. Walsh will, of course, have a contact number and conditions if there are noise that can be heard over the recommended levels from the environmental health officer and the limiter, then of course that call can be made into Gary and his team. Thanks very much, councillors.
Thank you. Right, okay, at this point.
Chairman, apologies, we have some clarification from the solicitor, David Lowens.
Far away,
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm, did everybody hear the closing speech correctly? Because I had it, unfortunately, muted the first 30 seconds or so. If it was that Alex Pender could be expected, if concerned with noise nuisance, to have made a representation, then that is understood and came through. If there was anything else, it might need repeating.
Sorry, I think that was my point that I was making, David. Paragraph 9.15 of the national guidance was my point, that would mean that you as a licensing authority could expect Mr. Pender to make a representation if he was concerned about public nuisance.
That's lovely. I didn't miss anything. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you for that, Mr. Smith. Okay, so at this point, this meeting will be closed and we will move to a debating session for members, and a further Zoom meeting will be convened at 12:30 to deliver the decision. So we'll move on to that next stage, and I think Sammy handles the logistics of that.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now stop the live session. If I could ask members just to stay with me until I confirm that the live session has finished. Just bear with me.